What's going on, everybody? This is John Jake Gaming on the mic here, coming at you with a brand new episode of the FCS Dynasty here on NCAA 06, featuring that next mod from the boys that also made the Madden next mod as well, as we have our sights set on yet another fantastic season here in the FCS Dynasty. We are now entering year number 3, and you see the cover of Ep.1 Sports. Does that mean we might potentially see a changing of the guard? We'll go ahead and have a deeper dive in this episode as we get ready for another year of FCS action. What we plan on doing, we're going to take a look at the preseason polls that have been released by Ep.1 Sports, and what we're also going to do in addition to that is we're going to take a look at the Preseason All-Americans, the Heisman Trophy race to start this season, and of course, one of the things that I'm sure some of you guys are really excited about in particular, we're going to take a look at where many of the new custom prospects are going to be starting their college football careers here in year number 3 as true freshmen. And then finally, to wrap up this episode, we're going to take a look at the week 1 matchups that we will be watching in the next episode, as we will actually have a few games here in week number 1 that we will definitely be watching, and I will be showing through gameplay in that next episode. So you're not going to want to miss a single thing, man. It's going to be a really exciting episode. I hope you guys are ready for it. If you are, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you do have to be brand new, and let's go ahead and dive into it. The preseason polls that have been released by Ep.1 Sports. So we get things started here in the preseason top 25 as we're getting things rocking and rolling here. As are we seeing a potential changing of the guard? I mean, y'all let me know down in the comments section, but with all that being said, we got 4 teams that are at the top that are B minuses. That is the highest rated schools in this series. They do have that B minus rating. More teams did achieve that, and that is James Madison will start as the preseason number 1 here in college football. Now, they do have an elite special teams unit. They have an A grade for special teams, and their defense is pretty solid as well, sitting at a C+. But James Madison, they kind of regressed to the mean a little bit. They made a deeper run than expected in year number 1, and then in year 2, they got that top 8 seed, in which they did end up losing to Central Michigan in what was considered a pretty significant upset at the time. So we'll see if James Madison can relive up to those expectations, as they will be seen as one of the favorites to win the national championship. And speaking of a potential favorite, we do have Eastern Carolina as well. They also come in as a B minus squad, and they come in as the national runners up, and because of that, they are considered the number 2 team in college football. New Hampshire is in this top 5 as well. They also have that B minus overall grade. New Hampshire got something to prove, as this is the last year of Carlos Montoya, who is a senior at that quarterback position. So really no time to waste for the New Hampshire Wildcats. They come in with the expectation is, you can't have a letdown in the playoffs. You have not won a single playoff game yet in this series. Year 3 is going to be huge for the future of New Hampshire football. And then, of course, San Diego State, a lot on them as well. They've had some letdowns here in this series. 2 number 1 seeds in the FCS playoffs that we have seen so far. But for San Diego State, they got to come in here and they got to bring it. One of the best teams in the country. Can they finally make a deep run, or will they have an early playoff exit? We should see them again with a high seed representing that Mountain West Conference. But these are the 4 that I see that are potential favorites to win a national championship. They are a part of my top tier. Now, there's a second tier that I do also have that is, considered the teams that I would think are dork horses to win the national championship. This is my second tier. We got UCF at number 5, Kent State at number 6. You can certainly never count them out, as they won 2 consecutive national championships in this series. They will come in looking to continue the title defense. It's hard to repeat. We'll see if Kent State can go ahead and do just that. North Dakota State, they also have an extremely talented football team. B- overall squad as well. But they have also not won a single playoff game. Same boat as New Hampshire. They have disappointed in the playoffs, and frankly, some doubts from the pollsters I've seen in the comment section, and talking to folks in the YouTube live premieres. North Dakota State apparently not playing anybody. We'll see if they can change that narrative here in year number 3. Same thing with Georgia Southern. I was actually having a conversation with Georgia Southern in the fantasy football draft that's hosted in the Discord. If you know, you know. But Georgia Southern definitely seen as overrated, and this might make some posters feel some type of way in the comment section. Coming in as number 8 in the country, but they are going to be led by Ikeda Woods. Meanwhile, a team to definitely consider on the ride is Southeast Missouri State. They signed all of those defensive prospects, so they definitely have a national championship caliber defense. How fast can that offense, get itself up to speed? It's a young offense, a lot of freshmen and sophomores that they did recruit over the last couple of years, and they're going to have to pick it up quickly. You don't need to be an elite offense for Southeast Missouri State to make a deep run here in year number 3, but you need to be adequate. You need to, if you can get to the high 20s, low 30s, be an average offense, you can make a deep run here, because I really love the defense that Southeast Missouri State is going to have this upcoming season. But that offense, that's going to be a major question mark. And that does wrap up the teams that, I think could either be considered a favorite to win a national championship, or be at the very least be a dark horse. So 10 teams that I can personally see. Western Carolina, they do also have a really great football team, B- overall squad, getting some love in the top 25 polls. However, that being said, though, on that 2-year probation, and so I talked about this in the offseason episode, they are not allowed to participate in the FCS playoffs while they are under probation. So it's going to be interesting to see how Western Carolina can go ahead and keep itself motivated, knowing that they won't have any postseason action with the exception of the conference championship, should they be bestowed with that kind of opportunity. As for Tennessee State, they'll look to get back to the FCS playoffs, as they are the defending champions of the Big Ten Conference. They come as a decent squad, the overall team. They'll be looking to make their second playoff appearance here in this series after they did end up missing the playoffs in year number 1. We'll see if the Tigers of Tennessee State make a deeper run, as they almost were able to dethrone the national champions in the second round. South Carolina State looking to do the same thing, as they are bestowed with the number 17 overall ranking. That already makes it 3 teams from the ACC conference that are ranked in the preseason top 25. South Carolina State, of course, they went 9-2 in the regular season, but did not make the conference championship game, as they lost to Maine, and those 2 teams ended up with a tiebreaker. So South Carolina State, they missed out on a potential conference championship, but that being said, they did get to experience playoff action, even though they did lose to Tennessee State. Will they get back here in year number 2? Or not year number 2, year number 3? We'll have to wait and see. But they do have a really solid defense that I am very excited about. Another team to watch out for, though, is Northwestern State. And is this finally the year that the Demons make the playoffs? 19th in the preseason poll. They got a decent squad, very comparable to Georgia Southern. They are going to have to replace Wallace Gates, and that could be a pretty big deal. He was the main engine for this offense, but they do have Aiden Rones as well. He was a first-team All-American last season. We'll see if he's a preseason All-American as well later on in this episode. But seeing that they are ranked at the top 25, that is a very good sign, as they were a team that was receiving votes the past couple of years when the playoff selection show came around, but they couldn't win their conference championship. They fell to Georgia Southern twice, and Northwestern State, they lose in last-second field goals both times, and it's just been really rough to see Northwestern State. I mean, they're a good football team, but they just had some bad luck, man. We'll see if they can finally turn around, even if they don't win that conference championship. If they finish at that 19, in those late teens, maybe that will actually be enough for them to go ahead and make it in to the FCS playoffs for the very first time. Also in here is Montana, who made that really deep run in year number 1, but missed the playoffs in year 2 after they really had a second half collapse. They do come back with a really strong defense that I think can definitely compete in the upper echelons of the FCS division. Offense, little bit shaking. They might have some inconsistencies like we did end up seeing last year, but Derek Keefe actually not coming back. So definitely a bunch of new faces for that Montana squad as well. We'll see how recruiting is shown for this Montana squad. And then rounding out the top 25, we got Texas Southern, who is a C- overall team, so not the best team on paper. Defense definitely has some question marks, and it's not going to be fixed immediately, I won't think. I mean, Texas Southern, they are going to be limited in their scholarships as well. They only have 15 scholarships to work with here in year number 3 this off season. They will have their full complement of scholarships at the end of year number 4, but Texas Southern, same thing as Western Carolina and Weber State, since they are on that probation, they are not going to be able to make it to the FCS playoffs here in the next couple of seasons. So that's definitely a really tough break for the Tigers, as Texas Southern did have a phenomenal regular season. They were a top 10 seed, but losing to Idaho in the first round, that is a really difficult pill to swallow. But now we go into the preseason Heisman watch list, and we got a pretty diverse group this year. We saw Michael Horn, who did end up winning the Heisman Trophy back in year number 2. He did end up graduating. Therefore, we are going to see a new Heisman Trophy winner, and all guys that are, coming for the most part from the Power 5 conferences within this FCS series, with a little bit of love for the Ivy League as well. Starting off as the Heisman favorite, though, we got Albert Miniacci, the senior redshirt running back from Georgia Southern. And Albert Miniacci, he just had a massive breakout year in year number 2. Dude ends up with 20 touchdowns on the ground with a long of 84 yards, 1,600 yards rushing as well, and he did contribute with 11 catches, 250 yards in an offense that is predicated on running the football. So Albert Miniacci, very well deserved. He does move into his senior year. He's a 90 overall guy, so definitely an NFL prospect, despite the fact that he's only 5'8" and 173 pounds. That kind of size might have some difficulties of holding up at the NFL level, but the Peachtree City product, is a very talented football player and definitely has a chance to win the Heisman here in year number 3. But someone that was part of the Heisman conversation last year was senior quarterback Travis Wilkerson. He did end up leading the Alcorn State Braves on an incredible run on the second half of the season. Unfortunately, they did end up falling short in the Big 12 Conference Championship, where they did end up losing to Texas Southern. But Travis Wilkerson does come back for his senior year. A very strong pocket passer, comes in. 44 touchdowns, 8 interceptions last year. That's really good for the amount of times that Alcorn State did throw the football. Saw a slight dip in the completion percentage, went from 70% to now down to 64%, but he will be a first-team All-American, that's for sure. Very excited about him this year. He may not have his Heisman Trophy winner, but he still has a very good receiving core, one of which is actually on this Heisman list that I will talk about later. But for right now, we got to go up to Tennessee State. Brian Hampton, the junior wide receiver for the Tigers. Now, Brian Hampton, he was someone that, didn't talk about all that much, but man, was he great. He was a transfer from the JUCO ranks. He was able to get a Division I scholarship to Tennessee State. And at 6'5", 180, definitely a possession guy, but don't get it twisted. He's got some speed on him as well to go with it. 88 speed for someone that's 6'5". That's, the dude runs like a gazelle. What is there else to say, right? So, I definitely love to see that. He had a great year last year. 1,300 yards receiving, 17 touchdowns as well. He was a favorite for Michael Berry. It's going to be crucial for the new quarterback that's going to take over for the Tigers, as Michael Berry has now moved on to the life of the NFL. But can't wait to see what Brian Hampton can do. He's a very talented football player, and he's going to start as the number 3 person for the preseason Heisman watch. As for Travis Wilkinson's teammate, we got Tom Williams, a sophomore wide receiver. Now, Tom Williams, one of the first people that we have seen on this list that actually was not originally in this series at the start of year number 1. As Tom Williams, he is a true sophomore. Michael Horn got a ton of attention, and rightfully so, because he was really something to watch, honestly. But Tom Williams, man, Tom Williams can play too. He was that second option as well behind Michael Horn, but he had a really good year as well as a true freshman. 70 catches, 1,100 yards, 15 touchdowns receiving, only has 6 drops, which honestly isn't that terrible, and he's only going to get better as well. Plus, he ends up playing both sides of the football too. That's another thing. Like, he played some corner, and he was solid at corner too. 44 tackles, multiple interceptions, multiple pass deflection as well. Dude was a two-way player for Alcorn State last year, and it was something to watch, man. I was really happy to see what Tom Williams can do, but now that Alcorn State does have a little bit more depth in general, we'll see what Williams can do now that he can solely focus on that wide receiver position. Can't wait to see what this product from Iberville, Mississippi can do as a repeat from his freshman campaign. And finally, someone that is receiving some love for the entire Ivy League, we got Joe Horton, the senior wide receiver for the Brown Bears, part of that team that did pull the upset on Temple back in the year 2 playoffs, and someone that has just been a really consistent force, despite the fact that there have been 2 separate quarterbacks that he has played with throughout his college career so far. We got his freshman year, or not his freshman, but his junior year. He ends up with 900 yards, 9 touchdowns, which, a solid year, but last season, breakout campaign. 90 catches, 1,400 yards, 17 touchdowns go with it as well. And here's a huge one. He doesn't drop a single pass. Now, that is absolutely impressive if you ask me. Also contributed a little bit in the running game. Last year was a first-team all-conference for the Ivy League and the Ends League Florida product. Looking to cap off his senior year. Looking for that 100 catches, 1,500 yards kind of season. Only 5'10" as well. That's the crazy part. He's not a guy that, doesn't necessarily have the physical tools to, be one of those, throw it up in one-on-one and hope he comes down with it. But he does carry elite speed, though, and he's perfect as a slot receiver for this Brown offense. We'll see if Joe Horton can go ahead and live up to the hype here for his Heisman Trophy campaign. So with the Heisman Trophy list officially out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of the All-Americans here, moving into year number 3. And these are, of course, preseason All-Americans. You never know what can actually happen over the course of the season. A lot can change in 15, 16 weeks of college football, right? But we know about Travis Wilkinson, though, senior registered quarterback from Alcorn State. He's on the Heisman watch list, so really no surprises there. But we go into the running backs here, though, and while Albert Miniachi, he's obviously on there, currently the Heisman favorite here in the preseason. Roderick Murray comes in as a first-team All-American as well, just a sophomore who made his collegiate debut last year, one of the younger players on this list. Great year for him, 1,800 yards, 16 touchdowns, and runs with a sense of power and authority. So Roderick Murray, definitely well deserving of those first team All-American honors. That being said, Marty Suber comes in as well, sophomore wide receiver. He's going to get first team All-American designations alongside Joe Horton, who not only is going to also be a first team All-American, but will also be on that Heisman watch. And speaking of that Heisman watch, Brian Hampton, the junior from Tennessee State, he will be on here as well. So far, just I haven't scrolled down yet. I don't know what's going on beyond here, but 4 of the 5 Heisman watch list candidates are already first team All-Americans, and we still haven't gone through the whole thing yet. But how about some surprises here? Johnny Green, the sophomore tight end out of Portland State, the Vikings, first team All-American here in the preseason. Wow, that is surprising. Now, Johnny Green had a good season, 29 catches, 600 yards, 7 touchdowns. Just really wasn't on anyone's radar. I mean, he wasn't considered like an actual All-American last season, like towards the end of last season. Oh, almost did something bad there. But from San Rafael, California. Yeah, I'm just really shocked by this, to be honest with you. I did not see this coming whatsoever, but Johnny Green, definitely someone that maybe we should be watching out for if Portland State gets some opportunity on national television, considering, we might see them in terms of playing against Montana and North Dakota State. But we move on to the offensive line here, and we're seeing a little bit more diversity in the teams that are represented, because in the first couple of years, it's been really occupied by a lot of North Dakota State guys, but we don't really see that here. We only seen one Bison player on the offensive line this year, and that's Marcus Johnson, the 6'5", 303-pound guy who is still in his sophomore campaign. But other than that, we do have some new faces in terms of teams that are in here. Cedric Hart, the sophomore left guard, he represents Georgia Southern on the first team All-American list. But Warren Ingram's in here as well, one of the more veteran pieces on this Southeast Missouri State offense. He comes in as a first team All-American after a pretty good freshman campaign, 29 pancakes and 3 sacks being allowed in his true freshman year, and just only is slated to get better as his career does progress. Joe Beck is in here as well, the senior from Kent State, representing the 2-time defending champs. He is in here as well. And then Joe Rice, the sophomore right tackle, playing for the New Hampshire Wildcats. He does round out the offensive line, and frankly, the offensive side of the ball here in terms of the first team All-Americans. Now, moving on to the defensive side of the football, we start with the defensive line, and we got senior redshirt Stephen Green as a first-team All-American, a guy that was an absolute menace to society last year. 19 sacks this guy ends up having. Does he crack 20 sacks this year? That would be something really interesting to watch. He also had that defensive touchdown that we saw in the FCS playoffs against Central Michigan. So, can't wait to see how Stephen Green handles things this year. But Nate Fine, the senior defensive lineman from Maine, helping his team get to the conference championship last year. Nate Fine, he did a fine job last year. Also ends up with double-digit sacks and comes back for his senior campaign. So, I know the Black Bears are very excited about that one. And then we move on to the interior of the defensive line. We got Jeff Waters, the sophomore defensive tackle who represents for Alcorn State. It's not all about offense for the Braves. They got some defensive talent as well, Jeff Waters being one of those guys. But on the other defensive tackle position, we got Brandon Fitzpatrick, the senior, representing for Norfolk State. And, for being in the interior defensive line, for defensive tackle, in terms of sacks, it's a different story. And it's a different scale just because when you're a defensive tackle, a lot of times you get double teamed a little bit more often than maybe a defensive end would. So Brandon Fitzpatrick does not have as many sacks as, your Seth Greens and your Nate Fines, but still a very good player for the Norfolk State Spartans and definitely earning that first team award. Moving over to the linebacking core for the first team All-Americans, we got Adam Hurd, the sophomore from Denver, who gets some love yet again. He was a All-American back in year number 2 and is on that preseason list once again for the Pioneers of Denver. Ryan Bush, though, probably one of the best players to come out of high school, at least to join the ranks of the FCS. I would not be shocked if he ends up being a first or second round pick. He is just that good. He definitely should have been a guy that got an FBS scholarship. I'm surprised that Ryan Bush did not come down to the FCS level. So I don't know if he was like a troubled kid in high school or what was going on with that. But check his overall. He's already a 90 overall as a sophomore. So if he ends up staying for, his senior year somehow, he should be draft eligible after his junior year. And if I was him, I would honestly declare if you're that good, but he could be someone that could definitely reach that 99 overall. And that would be the first time that we see that in this series. We've hardly seen anyone above a 95 at least so far, but Ryan Bush definitely well on track to reach that mark for sure. And then Mike Terry for Indiana State gets on this All-American list. He is a middle linebacker for the Sycamores and representing Terre Haute extremely well. Finally, we got the defensive backfield for the first team All-American group, and we got Charlie Goolsby, the true sophomore that is representing for Kent State. Tim O'Connor, who was on the Jim Forpay Award watch list last year, he is back for his sophomore campaign and is well deserving of those first team All-American award, as he was someone that was very close to winning the Jim Forpay as a true freshman. And then rounding out the group, we got Mark Motley, the sophomore from Western Kentucky. Was a bright spot for what was a disappointing year for the Hilltoppers. Ends up with 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery here in his true freshman campaign. Looks to build off of that as his college career continues to progress. And rounding out the skill position players for the first team, we got Alvin Johnson, the second All-American that Norfolk State gets to experience on this preseason list. Alvin Johnson also looking to build off his freshman year when he ends up with 4 interceptions and 3 forced fumbles. Finally, for the first team list, we got Jonathan Walden, the sophomore kicker from Eastern Michigan. And then for the punters, we got James Marshall, who will be a preseason first team All-American. Up next, we go on to the second team All-American list here for the preseason, as we go ahead and jump into who's rounding out this All-American group in general. And of course, no surprises here, Ikeita Woodson's on this list. He's been a fixture in the Georgia Southern offense since this series has started, but Ikeita Woods and his guys really have not performed in the big games, in the big moments. So we'll see if they can remove that stigma here in year number 3. This will be a big year for him as he does enter his junior year and kind of regressed a little bit between his freshman and sophomore year. His passing numbers were down. His rushing numbers were also down as well, being an option quarterback. Although for running the football, he was a little bit more efficient. Can we see him get back to what he was back when he was a true freshman? We'll have to wait and see. Now, as for the running backs, though, we do have George Mayhew being a second-team All-American and entering his true sophomore campaign. Same with Chad Wilson, also a sophomore running back representing for Central Michigan. He was part of a incredible run for the Chippewas, who ended up making it all the way to the semifinals and even had a chance to make it to the national championship game if it was for the fact that they just had way too many turnovers in terms of in that final quarter of action. That really decided their fate, and that allowed Eastern Carolina to make it to the national championship, which, by the way, haven't really said anything about Eastern Carolina so far, so there's still plenty of time, but we'll see if they're on this list or not. As for who is on this list, Ronnie Hartman, the sophomore from Tennessee Tech, does end up on the All-American list. The true sophomore last year, solid campaign, 57 catches, 690 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So a solid year, not a great year as a true freshman, but Tennessee Tech definitely had some problems in year number 2 as they did end up finishing below 500. Speaking of teams that did end up finishing below 500, we also have Murray State getting a player here on the second team list. Andre Hickson, who is entering his sophomore campaign. He comes in, I'm surprised he wasn't a first team All-American, but there's an insane amount of talent for the first teams guys at the wide receiver position. 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns. The first team list was really insane. I mean, I wouldn't change anybody from the first team list. It just shows how much talent there is down the FCS level in terms of that wide receiver position. But speaking of talent at the wide receiver position, Tom Williams is here as well. We saw him on the Heisman watch list for the preseason. He was like number 4, I believe, in terms of the watch list. He's also a second team guy. Now, moving over to the tight end, going into the hog mollies up front, we got Sacramento State tight end Travis Taylor. So, no Aiden Rose on this preseason watch list for the All-Americans. That's really interesting, but Travis Taylor, he was a phenomenal receiver last year. 700 yards, 5 touchdowns, only had the 1 drop. He was a good spot for Sacramento State, who was not close to making it to the playoffs at all. I believe they were either 4-7 or 5-6. I'm not exactly sure where they ended up, but they were a sub 500 team. But Travis Taylor definitely proved himself to be more than capable of handling the action here at the college level. And speaking of handling things at the college level, here comes the offensive lineman here in this group, as we start with AJ Love, the senior red shirt from Georgia Southern. This is their second All-American on the offensive line, as is Chad Mitchell from Southeast Missouri State. So even though it is a younger offense in terms of their skill players, Southeast Missouri State, they at least have some very good veterans on the offensive line that are going to give this new group of talented but inexperienced guys, they're going to give them some time to work with. And speaking of giving them time, Mike Hill will also provide that interior rushing attack, as well as some good solid pass protection. Is Mike Hill, true sophomore from New Hampshire. He is the second offensive lineman as well that is considered an All-American for that New Hampshire unit. Finally, round out the offensive side of football, we got sophomore center Joe Johnson, 6'5", 336 pounds, is an absolute giant, and he is going to be a key piece and a leader for the Citadel offense, as they are a run-heavy football team. But I know we talked about Eastern Carolina not having any All-Americans. We finally see somebody. Alex Haas from Eastern Carolina, right tackle, 6'5", 330 pounds, 67 pancakes last season as a true freshman. Is just incredibly strong as well, has incredible run blocking abilities. He can definitely move some guys if need be. But now we move over to the defensive side of football, and some smaller schools that are represented on this list for sure. As we move to the defensive side, Brandon Wiggins being one of them. He is a true sophomore from Southern Missouri State. Did not receive a lot of hype last year, but a very good player. 12 sacks in his true freshman year, multiple forced fumbles, forced recovery. I really love what Brandon Wiggins brings to the table as a pass rusher. He's a key piece for the Bears of Southern Missouri as they trying to make their first FCS playoff appearance in this series. As will Brent White, the sophomore from Alabama A&M, defensive lineman for the Bulldogs. He also ends with double-digit sacks to go with, and it just goes to show the level of talent down here, even in lower Division I college football. I mean, and that's the beautiful thing about the NFL at times. Like, it doesn't matter where you come from, whether you're from a big-time school in the SEC, or you're from an FCS, Division II, or even few cases Division III school. If you're good enough, the NFL will find you in some way, shape, or form, right? So that's really a beautiful thing about it. Keith Ellison, meanwhile, sophomore defensive tackle for the Mavericks of Omaha, part of one of the worst teams in college football, but it wasn't because of him for sure. He definitely clogged up the middle. 5 sacks, 77 tackles, forced fumble recovery as well. So he definitely can move some bodies and is a bright spot for what is otherwise going to be a tough year for Omaha. They're one of the worst teams in the country. As for Dallas Spence, yet another true sophomore. All of these guys in the defensive line are true sophomores, so not even original guys. Dallas Spence comes in, true sophomore, 6'3", 273 pounds, so not as big as many defensive linemen, but I mean, you still got some meat. And he, for a guy that is known for stopping the run, those 10 sacks, most of which happening in Ivy League play, that's really impressive. So definitely deserving of that second team designation. Moving on to the linebackers here, we go to Jackson State, that has Jason Henry, who's looking to have a breakout campaign with the Jackson State Tigers. 86 tackles, 6 sacks, 5 interceptions. does a little bit of everything for Jackson State, as does true sophomore Daryl Folk, who had 13 sacks last year. He loves to get after that quarterback. Translates really well as an edge rusher from the from the high school level to the collegiate level. And his hands are getting even better than what they were his freshman year. So I expect those 2 interceptions to definitely creep up in his true sophomore campaign. But rounding out the linebackers, we got Columbia linebacker Paul Daniel, also in his true sophomore campaign. Last year, he ends up with over 100 tackles, 6 sacks, 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles. And that's the beautiful thing about these linebackers. They do a little bit of everything. As for the remaining members of the second team All-American group, we got Marcus Williams, the true sophomore for North Dakota State. He does make it onto this list after a great freshman year that we saw a lot of games for, as Bison was on television lots of times in year number 2. Adam Butler also gets those second team All-Americans. So James Madison, known for their offense, they do get a defensive All-American here. Ends up with 6 interceptions, 11 pass deflections. And has a very good size, 6'1". Definitely can climb with the best of them in terms of those one-on-one situations. And then the last skill player in the entire All-American list is Marcus Craig. True sophomore from Princeton, so you already know, very smart dude. And that does relate to his football IQ. Ends up with 5 interceptions in his true freshman year. We'll see if he can relive those expectations for his sophomore year, as now we'll see if he can go ahead and help lead Princeton to the FCS playoffs for the very first time. Finally, we have Eddie Davidson, who, had a really great year last year. Senior redshirt, he's a leader of that defense, going to be part of a top 5 defense, I would expect, for year number 3. I would not be shocked by that whatsoever, but Eddie Davidson, just been a really consistent player. While it's not like eye-popping numbers by any means, he's just a dude that knows where to be and rarely gives up any big plays, but you can see him do something even if it's not fully reflected on the stat sheet. So really love Eddie Davidson as a football player as he nears his graduation. Finally, for the kickers and punters, we have Antoine Dunn from UL Monroe, and then we have Phil Butler, the senior redshirt representing for the Sanford Bulldogs. He is the All-American from Sanford University. Alright boys, so before I kind of dive into where your guys' custom prospects went here in season number 3, I kind of wanted to talk about how the custom prospect system works. So it's based off of, whether you're a channel member or if you're a guy in our Discord or if you even submitted somebody through YouTube. And, it's just an extra incentive that I wanted to have for those that wanted to support my channel in a more personal way. So if you're an OG tier channel member, that is my $5 tier. It is for 80 to 85 overall. Day 1 tier is 75 to 80, Discord 70 to 75, and then if it's submitted on YouTube, then it's a 60 to 69 overall guy. And the reason I wanted to do that for 2 different reasons. First and foremost, like I said, wanted to make sure that the people that support my channel in a more personal way, they do go ahead and get those extra perks and benefits. And then also, secondarily, I could just put you on like the team that you asked for, but sometimes there's a case where your first or second choice is like a 50 something overall for a true freshman, and honestly that just isn't very fun in my opinion. Y'all deserve a little bit more talented player, someone that actually has the chance to see the field in their college career, right? So that's why I went ahead and did that. So I did my best to get you to either one of your top 3 schools for those of you that did submit your prospect, but I also want to make sure that you guys had a chance to at least see the field at least some point in your collegiate career. So with all that being said, we'll go ahead now and check out your guys' custom prospects here in season number 3. Let's go check them out. So now that I explain which of your custom players went where in the FCS Dynasty, that being said, there was a ton of support for this series. I had over 90 custom prospects joining the collegiate ranks here in season number 3, so definitely One of the most submissions I've ever had for any series. So again, thank you guys so much for all of the support for this series. But with that being said, I'm gonna run through all of the custom guys for year number 2 that are joining the custom ranks here for the very first time as true freshmen here in number 3. And I'm gonna run through them as quick as possible so that it's not like an hour-long segment or anything like that. So starting out, we got Bo McAllister, going to be playing his college ball at Alabama State, but there's some definite talent ahead of him. Bo McAllister looks to be a third-string guy to start his college career. Moving on to Alcorn State, though, and surprisingly, there definitely is some competition at the quarterback position. I talked about Travis Wilkerson, but he's going to be pressed by one custom in particular, Rod Robertson, who comes in as a very highly regarded freshman, so he'll be pushing Travis Wilkerson. We'll see who ends up starting there, but I would imagine it'll be Travis will win the starting job with Rod Robertson waiting in the wings. But even among the freshman class, there's going to be a lot of competition. Lots of talented freshmen that Alcorn State brought in at the quarterback position. Hassan Brooks is a one, for example. He's a 78 overall. Devin Hardy also is in here. He's a 74. And then Latrell Pierre Jackson, 6'7" quarterback. He is a 72 overall. So 7 quarterbacks that Alcorn State actually has. I wouldn't be shocked if a couple of these guys do end up transferring. Up next, we go to Appalachian State for their only custom player that they have brand new to the series, and that is Malik Davis III. 6'2", 210 pounds. He is slated to be the number 1 wide receiver option for the Mountaineers here in year number 3. As for Arkansas Pine Bluff, though, we do have a new man and quarterback, as Jarrell Patterson did graduate from Arkansas Pine Bluff. Starting for the Golden Lions in year number 3 will be Nair Matthews, who's 6'2", 229 pounds, and will get his first taste of college action early. But waiting in the wings and winning that backup position with ease is Jacob Cool Beans, and he is also brings some good size, 6'1", 222 pounds. If Nair Matthews does not perform or ends up getting hurt, it will be the Cool Beans that will make his collegiate debut. However, on the defensive side of the football, we got Smash Woods, who will actually be behind Jacob Brightman on the depth chart. Still, I expect Smash Woods to make a contribution right away in special teams and occasionally on the defensive side of the football. Earlier, I talked about Joe Horton and his aspirations for the Heisman Trophy, but Kevin Jones, he's going to have a great mentor to work with, though. I'll tell you what, true freshman coming in, solid overall, 68 overall kind of guy, a YouTube channel submission, and he comes in, he's going to be the number 4 wide receiver. So, you know, even though he may not be the highest overall on the face of the planet, I still expect him to get some run as a true freshman and get some early playing time. Speaking of that wide receiver position, though, we know that Joe Reed is gone, and there's some talent replacing him for sure. 5 freshmen coming in, but 2 that I want to talk about the most is Mike Thomas, the freshman wide receiver at 6 foot, 200 pounds. He comes in as the number 1 wide receiver day 1. And then also Malachi Ross comes in as the number 3 wide receiver. Both of these guys should get plenty of early playing time and early opportunities to go ahead and distinguish themselves. That being said, though, Chattanooga, who's known for their offense, they got a absolute behemoth of a man on defensive tackle, Cade Yates, who will be the starting defensive tackle for the Chattanooga Mocs. 6'8", 292 pounds. You want to talk about a massive human being? We certainly get that in this guy right here. Moving over to Eastern Illinois, as there is one new custom prospect joining the ranks of FCS college football, as that is Russell Matthews. There was a 4-way battle in camp, but he just proved that he was simply built different compared to the rest. And Russell Matthews, at 6 foot 196, will start for the Panthers in his true freshman year. Eastern Kentucky, on the other hand, has multiple custom prospects joining the team. One of which is J.D. Brooks at 6 foot 220 pounds. He will be the backup running back behind fellow freshman Lewis Rouse. But it will be the defense that will get more attention this year, as Marshawn Palmer comes in as one of the highly rated defensive linemen in FCS college football. He was the #1 recruit at defensive end last year and comes in as an 84 overall. Watch out for Marshawn Palmer to really turn some heads in his true freshman campaign. Comes with a ton of height for sure, but the same can also be said for Robbie O'Brien. While not as highly regarded as Marshawn Palmer, he still comes with a lot of hype. 80 overall, 87 speed for a linebacker. He's going to look to take some heads off. Up next, we go to Eastern Washington, who gets their first defensive custom player in this series. We got Ball Hawk Woods, and thankfully for his mom, he does end up being an absolute ball hawk. Comes into his true freshman campaign, really athletic actually, 74 overall, 91 speed. Dude is a speed demon, along with a lot of the other defensive backs that are on this team, so a lot of athleticism here. But Ball Hawk Woods will be competing for that #2 corner job here in year number 3. Next custom player that I wanted to go ahead and talk about, though, is David Baxter. He was actually a bracket challenge contest winner, fun fact of the day, and comes in as the #1 wide receiver for the Elon Phoenix at 6 foot 184. The Phoenix are going to be relying on him early and often in order to rise from the ashes. Also coming in with some major expectations is Joshua Krakowski, coming from Poland, but definitely has some natural talent. 82 overall kind of guy, channel member submission, but going to be buried on the depth chart though, as he's going to be behind Albert Miniachi, who's on the Heisman finalist list, and Blake Williams, who is the hair for when Miniachi graduates. So Josh is going to have to wait his turn, but watch for him to turn some heads when he finally gets on the field. As for the Hampton Pirates, they do actually go ahead and get 3 custom players here in year number 3. Starting with top wide receiver Uni Minimoto. He ends up at 6 foot, 164 pounds, so needs to put on some weight, but does carry some natural talent. Also carrying some natural talent is Jordan Hawkins, the number 3 wide receiver for the Pirates, so should also receive some early playing time. Definitely a burner at 92 speed, and has good size as well, 6'1", 200 pounds. But he will not be the only custom player that will be starting for the Hampton Pirates, though, as John Tom is going to be starting at right guard for the Hampton Pirates in his true freshman campaign. 68 overall. He's going to have a lot of work to do if he wants to go ahead and prove that he is a starting caliber offensive line here in the FBS. Up next, we have the running back position for the Howard Bison, and Kevin Hardy is going to be part of his team for his true freshman campaign. It's going to be fighting for Burdett Ewing for that starting spot, who is a lot faster, but Kevin Hardy brings a lot more power and actually is grasping the playbook better than the incumbent starter. So maybe Kevin Hardy will get his chance to start at the running back position. But let's swing things out to the Pacific Northwest, though, as we go to Idaho State, where we find true freshman Connor Smith, who will be starting for the Bengals early. Definitely a solid football player, 70 overall, and will get a chance early to prove himself as a college athlete. As for Indiana State, they will have a couple of custom guys, actually, as we start with Ricky Daniels, who actually be lined up with fellow custom prospect Redmond Porter, who's a second-team all-conference designation here in the preseason. Ricky Daniels will have a chance to learn alongside Redmond Porter and compete for that #1 spot. But keeping it in the wide receiver group, though, we got Amade Nadaye, that's going to be a tongue twister for sure, but Amade Nadaye, he is actually an athlete who converts best to the wide receiver position, but he's going to be getting some early playing time here, the number 2 wide receiver for the Jackson State Tigers. Also keeping the trend with offensive weapons that are looking to make a difference early, we got Mario Brunner, who is going to be the starting tailback for Jacksonville State. But right behind him is going to be Joshua Thomas, who's also looking to get some early opportunities to get some carries as the secondary running back for the Gamecocks. Up next, we have the Maine Black Bears. As you guys already know about Flash Williams, but there's going to be some competition behind him for the backup quarterback position, and 2 players that are drastically different. Octavius Raymond James, who is a scrambling type of quarterback. He will get the first crack at being the backup. But then RJ Riley is also in the mix as well. He's more of a pocket passer. But that being said, right now, O.R. James, he is going to play. He's going to get first crack at the backup spot because he does have a better understanding of the playbook. But at the cornerback position, though, we have a new number 1 corner, and that is true freshman Terry Johnson, who will be the number 1 corner here. Day 1 for this main squad that made it to the ACC championship last year. That being said, though, Will Smith will still be a starter. He just will get slotted down to that number 2 corner. Now, the Montana Grizzlies are going to be sorely missing their Lombardi Trophy winner, but they did bring in some talent to kind of make up for that, though. Rilo Young is an example of that, and he is going to be a rotational piece early for this Montana squad to help trying to lead the Grizzlies back to the FCS playoffs. However, that being said, though, Montana State, their chief rival, got a serious talent as a true freshman, and that is Kev Stamper. Even though he's going to be a wide receiver free this year, look for him to contribute on special teams this upcoming season. As for North Carolina A&T, we'll have some competition for a starting quarterback position as Smoke James comes in and is looking to push Travis Byers, the senior quarterback that still has a slight edge due to his better understanding of the playbook. Either way, though, Caden Thomas is going to be the 3rd string quarterback for North Carolina A&T in his true freshman campaign. But we'll definitely have to watch out for Smoke James to see if he can win that starting quarterback and be that QB1. As for New Hampshire, the Wildcats do end up bringing in a couple of custom players themselves, as starting with the running back position, they got J.D. McCoy, who is going to start out as the 3rd string running back for the Wildcats. Then at the tackle position, we have probably one of the best backups in college football, at least at this level, Umar Fox, who is going to be a 2nd string tackle. He's a backup tackle, but 82 overall. He's going to have insane levels of talent. Speaking of having insane levels of talent, we also have Otis Gripe, who will be slotted in right away as the number 2 corner. Definitely a speed demon at 92 speed. He could make some contributions also on special teams. Speaking of making contributions early, Speedy Woods, we're going to live up to that name as he comes with some pretty sound speed, 88 speed that Speedy Wood has. 70 overall, though, looks to be the competing for that number 1 wide receiver spot and looks to be a dynamic weapon that Frederick McNair, who starting into an NFL prospect, by the way, as just a true sophomore, looking for Speedy Woods to contribute early for the Colonels. As for Norfolk State, we got J.C. Samuel, who comes in with some good talent on him as well. 74 overall as a true freshman, but will be buried on the depth chart. He starts as the 3rd string running back. Speaking of the talent surrounding in FCS college football, as true freshmen, mind you, we got 4 custom guys that are now joining the Bison. We start with John Weeks, who's going to be the number 4 wide receiver on this Bison team. Is going to sit behind Wilrod Montez, who did make an immediate impact for the Bison in year number 2. But someone that will be starting right away on the offensive line is Chris Black. He comes with a lot of hype, 82 overall, 91 strength, easily one of the strongest guys on what is a very physical offensive line for the Bison. At outside linebacker, we got Clayton Lewis, who at 6'1", 217 pounds, is going to be looking to start right away for the Bison defense. And the same could potentially be said for Zachariah O'Brien. While he is buried on the depth chart right now at that middle linebacker position, all it takes is a few injuries and suddenly he finds himself on the field and he's more than capable of making things happen. Over at Northeastern University, we got Joe Cool, who comes in as a 68 overall. He will be backing up senior Brandon Robinson. So after this year, Joe Cool could very well be a starter. Speaking of that quarterback position, Northern Arizona looks to fill the incumbent role at quarterback as Michael Douglas did move on to the NFL. Tyrone Wolf looks to be one of those players. He comes in as a 74 overall, but will be competing with Prince Daniels, who will also be a competitor for that starting quarterback job. However, that being said, Northern Arizona does also have a custom player at the running back position, and that is Leo Thomas, who comes in 68 overall, but will be buried on the depth chart, likely to be redshirted. However, someone that I will not expect to be redshirted, though, is Bo Arias, one of the best running backs from the high school ranks last year. He is going to be the replacement for Wallace Gates. Going to be some big shoes to fill, but I have a feeling that he is capable of doing just that. However, that being said, though, the #1 player in high school football last year, Milo Patterson, ends up being a custom guy. And of course, best player in high school football last year, steps in right away for this Northwestern State football team and is going to start right away for the Demons. Speaking of that Demon time, Kyle Hardy looks to be that day one for Portland State as he will fight for that starting quarterback position. Kyle Hardy, the true freshman, is going to compete with Carl Pierre, who was a first-team all-conference in the preseason. So maybe Carl Pierre starts as a starter with Carl Hardy waiting in the wings. But someone that will be waiting his time, though, is Jape Pinet, 6'2", 215 pounds. Look for him to get redshirted in his true freshman campaign. However, that being said, someone who will probably not be redshirted this year, though, is Ryan Otis, who is currently slotted in as the #2 wide receiver. Look for him to get plenty of targets this upcoming season. Speaking of guys that will get a lot of targets and a lot of attention, though, we got Jamie McKenzie, 6'2", 199 pounds. He is going to be the #1 receiver right away for Prairie View, and is going to get a lot of targets as well as a lot of attention from these defenses. Up next, we got Chris Stewart from Princeton. And Chris Stewart, he proves himself as he ends up being the #1 defensive tackle for the Princeton Tigers. Going to be starting right away for that defense in the Ivy League. But one of my favorite custom players in this entire series was made based off of me, actually. This is Jacob Hill. He is actually going to be playing across the country, though, in Sacramento State. But he will be the #1 wide receiver and will be getting plenty of early playing time. Someone that will be trying to fight their way to get early playing time, though, is Louis Ward. He's going to be the starting not the starting quarterback. He's going to actually be the backup quarterback for Sam Houston State here behind fellow true freshman David Bullock. But if Bullock gets hurt or injured, Louis Ward will have his opportunity. Also looking to be the backup quarterback is Dante Thomas. He will be the backup behind also fellow true freshman Aston Hines, who has the same circumstances. Aston Hines just being a little bit more athletic, and that ultimately ends up being the difference. However, there is one custom player starting for the Sanford Bulldogs, at least on the offensive side. Excuse me, I just barbed that sexy. On the offensive side of football, it's Azante Randolph Jr. He does end up winning the #1 running back job in camp, beating out sophomore tailback George Williams. Finally, on the defensive side of football for the Sanford Bulldogs, we got Jabari Thomas at 5'11", 180 pounds. He does also win the #1 corner job right away, so look for him to take on the best receivers that the Big Ten Conference has to offer. Now, South Carolina State was known for having a fantastic defense last year, and that is going to continue with some pretty talented players joining this team. Notably, we got Little Horn Shepherd, a Native American-born football player. He is actually going to win the starting job as he overtakes fellow custom Trent Williams. So he's going to get a chance to play alongside Ryan Bush, who is an absolute monster. Speaking of monsters, though, we got Theodore Lewis as a true freshman. He is also going to be one of the best linebackers on this roster, and is going to play along Ryan Bush in that linebacker core. Finally, for the strong safety position for South Carolina State, we got Quan Hutch, who at 6'3", 172, easily wins the starting strong safety job over David Weddle, a sophomore redshirt. Look for Quan Hutch to potentially be a multi-year starter. As for Logan Tybergian, who is actually the son of Coach Tybergian, who actually is the head coach at Southeast Missouri State, he goes to an in-state school that is not his own because he wanted a chance to get some early playing time, and he certainly gets it here. 70 overall, he is easily going to be the lead back for the Bears this upcoming season. Now, Southeastern brought in several freshmen this upcoming year, but 3 of them end up being your custom guys. Mateo West, first and foremost, he's going to be the #1 wide receiver for the Southeastern Lions. 80 overall, definitely well deserved. But looking to find his way onto the field, though, is Michael Garrett. He starts as the #5 wide receiver, but an absolute burner, 95 speed, so I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up contributing on special teams. This is Michael Garrett. And then finally, someone that actually might end up getting redshirt depending on what happens on the field this year is Katie Bodrux. He's going to be a 68 overall, very deep on the depth chart. He's like the 7th string wide receiver. Like, he is 7th out of 9th right now. So, like, best case scenario, 4th string wide receiver. Probably won't see the field that much, if at all. As for the Southern Jaguars, they will be welcoming Joseph Pierre Martin, the only custom that they will be receiving here in year #2. Lining up alongside Zoo Animal, Joseph Pierre Martin will be looking to start also as a true freshman if he can fight off senior David Taylor. Going down south, though, or at least keeping it down south, we go to the state of Texas to check out Stephen F. Austin. We got John Hall. He's going to be a true freshman for the Lumberjacks and starts as a true freshman as a 3rd-string quarterback, but sitting behind Joe Morgan and Matt Williamson, it's unclear if he will get an opportunity to be a starting quarterback. But now we'll go ahead and jump towards Tennessee Martin, where they have a couple of custom guys. We got Brian Ramsey, who comes in as the backup quarterback, coming in as a true freshman. He will be sitting behind Donnie Jacobs, at least in terms of as of right now. However, for the very first time, we will actually see a kicker/punter that will be a custom player, and that is Chris Martin. Chris Martin going to go ahead and be a true freshman for the Skyhawks, and with him being the only kicker on the roster, he's going to be a starter right away. Moving over to Texas Southern, who is under NCAA sanctions as of right now, Solomon West. If he ends up still on national TV, he'll be a fun one to watch. 90 speed, absolutely incredible. Not only is he the #1 wide receiver on this Texas Southern team, which is a very young football team, might I add, but that being said, though, he's one of the best players on this roster in general, so I'm going to be excited to see how Solomon West's college career ends up turning out. Another player who I'm also going to be really excited for, but for a different reason, because he is a backup. One of the best custom names I've honestly ever seen. Hingle McCringleberry. I couldn't even get his full last name in there, but he is supposed to be a McCringleberry. He does end up being the #3 tight end. Could see some spare playing time, but also possible that he does end up getting the red shirt. Someone who I would expect to not get the red shirt, though, is Malachi Davis III. He's going to slot in as the #2 wide receiver with #1 Brandon McNeil, who's going to look to teach him the ropes, as Davis is going to be the future at this position for the Citadel football team. Up next, we have cornerback Michael Rose, who is actually the younger brother to Northwestern State tight end Aiden Rose. Michael is going to be the number 2 corner for Northern Iowa and will be starting right away for this Northern Iowa squad. But then we go to Weber State, and Weber State, they got a really interesting quarterback battle for the Wildcats, even though they will not be going to the FCS playoffs for the next 2 seasons because of NCAA sanctions. Right now, it's Ep.1 Thomas that is going to be on the top. He is the number 1 quarterback in high school football last year, so he'll get the first shot at the starting job. But Jackson DeVille is right on his heels, though. He's also an 80 overall. And then the guy that will likely end up transferring will be E.J. Joseph, who will start his college career with Weber State, but it's unclear if he actually ends up staying there or not. Then the last custom player that is not on a custom coach's roster is Jose Claude San Martin. Heck of a name, by the way. He starts out as the number 3 wide receiver for the Hilltoppers as he looks to get this Western Kentucky team back on track. But now we go to your guys' custom coaches in terms of what kind of custom players did they end up bringing in. And a lot of talent on this list here once again. As we jump to the wide receiver position, a great group already that features David Foreign, who's the number 1 wide receiver, Jody Gentry, who's number 2, Jonathan Henderson, he slides down to number 4 because Brad Andrioza comes into town, 6'6", almost 90 speed already. He's going to be an absolute problem for whoever does end up winning the quarterback battle for the James Madison Dukes. And speaking of that quarterback battle, let's see who's going to be a new starting quarterback for James Madison. So with Kenny Raymer now graduating, it looks like it is officially going to be the Stephen Rogers era, as he does end up winning that starting quarterback battle. In camp, he does beat out Stephen Terry, who was redshirted for his true freshman year. But 2 new quarterbacks do join the fold for James Madison. Hans Heinlein, 80 overall guy, and Grayson Skinner is a 74, but both of them are going to be redshirted this upcoming season. And finally, for the running back position, as of right now, we got Kyle Lockhart, who will also be buried on the depth chart initially. He will be the 3rd string tailback for James Madison. Now, Southeast Missouri State, they might be the biggest winners of the custom players. I think they ended up with 5 custom guys from this recruiting class. Starting at the quarterback position is Travis Johnson, who is going to be the heir apparent for Glenn Williams, who did go off to the NFL. So Travis Johnson is certainly going to have some decent sized shoes to fill. But going over to defensive tackle, though, and this is where the defense really shines. Lots of talent on the defense now. We got Joseph Lazayak. He's going to be the number 1 defensive tackle for the Red Hawks as he looks to cause some major trouble early in his college career. An outside linebacker, y'all are aware of Jerome Beach, but Bam Bam Hendrick, now that is a heck of a name as well. He is going to be starting at left outside linebacker, also looking to cause some major trouble early. Over at the middle linebacker position, however, we got Usman Lewis, who is actually the grandson of Ray Lewis. So Usman Lewis, he's going to play some FCS college football and is going to likely be the number 1 middle linebacker if he can fight off Paul Miller. And then in the secondary, we got 2 very talented guys as well. Kentrill, true freshman, is going to win the free safety job with ease and is a 94 speed, absolutely speed demon type stuff. And then at strong safety, we got Kelly Russell, who is going to be the heir apparent. Going to sit behind Eddie Davidson for a year, but look for him to be an impact starter or even someone that makes some impact plays on the field in his true freshman year. And the last custom player that I wanted to highlight before previewing the games in week number 1 is J.C. Dallas. He's going to be redshirted as of right now, but does have a path to eventually be the starting quarterback for the Western Carolina Catamounts. So it's been a fun preview episode as we're getting ready to gear up for year number 3, but we gotta talk about the games that are going to be utilized to kick off season number 3 here in the FCS Dynasty. And we start off with the first game that we have on the docket. we got Alabama A&M taking on Morgan State. Now, neither of these two teams made it to the playoffs last year, but Alabama A&M, they finished stronger in particular. They did win their last 2 games of the year in the regular season, where Morgan State, they finished their year on a high note as well, beating Rhode Island in the regular season finale. So Alabama A&M and Morgan State are going to be the very first game that we see in the next episode, and I'll be looking for Alabama A&M to win what should be a very close game. But then we have the game of the week here. We got North Carolina A&T State going on the road to play against the Akron Zips. Now, neither of these teams made the FCS playoffs, but Akron, they're getting some more hype initially. 15th ranked team in the country, C+ overall squad, C offense, C+ defense. But North Carolina A&T, they came around in that second half of the year. They won their last couple of games. They were actually included in the AP Top 25 to end the season. They were actually very close to making it the FCS playoffs, closer than Akron, matter of fact, but Akron does initially have the more talented team. So I'll be looking for Akron to win this game, but I think it's going to be a really close one, and I'm excited for this game of the week to start the year. And then finally, to end week number 1 action in the next episode, we will have UMass taking on the Crimson of Harvard. Now, Harvard, they may have the more disciplined team, but Harvard, they might be just a little bit overmatched, as they are just completely outclassed in terms of talent. UMass, they're going to be looking for their first playoff appearance of this series. They were kind of close in year number 2, but that loss to Rhode Island last year really derailed them. So we'll see if the Minutemen can get themselves back on track here to start year number 3. But guys, that is going to wrap things up in this episode. I hope you enjoyed this year 3 preview. If you did, make sure you go ahead, smash that like button, hit that subscribe button and notification bell if you do happen to be brand new. And in terms of a couple of days from now, I will be coming back to you guys in terms of the week 1 action here as we start year number 3. Hope you guys are excited for it, but in the meantime, I hope you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.